Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. So glad everybody could be with us this evening. Lots to keep talking around about the National Football League. As always, I'm Lloyd Vance, veteran NFL writer. I'm here with my tag team partner, Kevin Midgette. Kevin, how you doing this evening?
Doing well, doing well. Ready to get this season started already.
Yeah, it's funny because I think the Ravens may be one of the last teams in their mini camp. They have a mini camp which they are going to have June 17th through the 19th. They're one of the last teams to kind of go through this mini camp, OTAs, whatever they're calling them now, and this is a tough time for me. I do like baseball and the Phillies and all that, but these OTAs are you getting anything out of it? I mean, is it a much ado about nothing? Or I mean, training camp will be here before we know late July, but you know how are you occupying your time in terms of football?
It's the same thing they bleed all the time. It's basically for OTAs and everything. It's almost like corral kids into their like orientation in the school. Make sure everyone knows where their classroom is, everything else. All the new guys knew where the facilities are and everything. Make sure who's happy with the contract, who's not happy with the contract, who's not showing up right now. It's more of the business side of the game, and kind of just an introduction into the season. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, and every team's got 90 guys on their roster, and whether that's an undrafted free agent or guys they signed from other teams, they're just putting this group together, and that's who's going to go to training camp. And I tend to think um, the roster is 53 players. I tend to think 40 of those players are already known. You know what I mean? Pretty much. They know where they are. They know where they're slotted, and the GM and the coach have already got plans for them. But you want to fill out the special teams. Your fourth running back, your fifth linebacker, your safety that's going to play on special teams. So these times, it's good, but let's face it, they're not hitting each other. So everybody's saying about, oh, he looks great. He's in the best shape of his life. I just read, Travis Kelsey's lost 25 pounds. He's really getting ready to go. He's upset at the way he played in the Super Bowl and the playoffs. Um, is there anything we can take from these guys getting in shape, the best shape of their lives, or it's just like, all right, much ado about nothing? Because I saw something the other day said Patrick Mahomes looking a little doughy. He looked about 10 pounds up.
Looking doughy. I tell you what, Debo Samuel just entered the chat on that one right there. That guy's got some cake going on right now. My God. Not looking like quite the speedster at this point. These guys should be in shape. This is what you do for a living. This is what you get paid to do. If you're not in shape for the first day, when are you going to be in shape? By about week 9, I should be good to go. I should be really, on my regiment. So if they're not in shape now, there's bigger issues.
Yeah, and there's a lot of clauses they put in these contracts in terms of saying, okay, you hit this weight or whatever, you show up for this many off-season practices, you get a bonus, and they make it worth their while. So yeah, it is imperative on these guys to, come into camp ready to roll in shape. It's crazy. I just talked to some of the older guys, and they used to sell like insurance in the off season. They had a real job. Some of them were like, I made more money in insurance than I did playing. So it's just crazy, how that all works. But the athletes today, the money is crazy, and they should be earning it. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of occupying time, I wanted to get your quick take on this. The UFL championship was this past week. The DC Defenders win it 58, scored 58. The Panthers of Michigan only scored 34. DC wins the title. There were about 14,500 fans in attendance in St. Louis, and a little under a million watched it on ABC. So some people are watching it. Did you tune in for any of it? Do you care? Is this a non-story?
Lloyd, as soon as I get off the show, I'm going down to the parade route. It's going to be crazy. There's going to be about 35 people. We're all just going to line there, and they're just going to circle around the block 10 times. So it's going to be a hell of a parade, man. You should come join me down there. The people watching who are diehard football heads, no doubt about it. There's definitely the gambling contingent that wants to bet on some football in the off season, and it's background something to watch. I mean, out of the whole league, you might get one or two guys, and good for them though. I mean, shoot, I'd rather be playing sports actually than going to my Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. It's another outlet for them and to keep their dream going on. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm surprised they had that many people show up. To be honest, good for them.
Yeah, and the league is surviving. I'll just put it that way. You have The Rock that's trying to run this thing, but they do have the support of Fox as well as ABC, and that's always a big thing in terms of having a TV contract, keeping this thing going. But unless they can hook it with the NFL, and the NFL's like, okay, we're going to make you our G League, our developmental league, and we can send people up and down just like, in baseball or something. I just don't, the viability of it, that somehow the NFL's got to get involved, but I just don't. I don't know if the NFL wants to do it after NFL Europe, where they lost so much money in the spring in the past. So, you and I talked before about spring football and our love for the old USFL. But do you think spring football is viable? Is this league going to last, or is it going to go by the way of, you know, the American Football Alliance and all these other leagues?
I don't know. You're definitely going to know when they're about to belly up because The Rock's going to end up doing another Scorpion King movie or the Fast and the Furious 24 is going to come out or something. He's like, man, I really need to bankroll this thing a little more. So I don't think it's viable, to be honest. I mean, it was different when the first inception of the USFL came out. There was legitimate top college players going to play in that league. And unless you can get something like that, it's never going to compete.
Yeah, and you have the Hall of Famers that were in the USFL, and they had the ability, guys open the checkbooks and sign these players and brought them over from the NFL. They could then compete in terms of money, but I just the dollars are not there, and we'll see how it works out. The NFL is always like, yeah, we need to have a developmental league, but I really believe the SEC is their development league. That with every year we looked at the draft, and I believe 60+%, to 70% of the players are coming from SEC, Big Ten, and all those types of areas. They're really not reaching like they did in the past, going to some of these smaller schools. You'd always like to see a guy from Delaware, a guy from Villanova get an opportunity to get drafted, but now they grab those types of guys on free agent market after the draft, and the SEC, they're already practicing. They have the spring practice, and then they seem to get together, and that's where the scouts are going. They're going down there and grabbing the players. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, good story for DC guys, and I know Bryce Perkins, who was on the Rams at one point, he had a good season for the Panthers as their quarterback. So we'll see how that works out. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Kevin, a lot of my Eagles fans, we got a lot of Eagles people. They said we gypped them last week. We kind of went over everything, the roster and stuff. So I wanted to jump back to the Eagles, and everybody said, oh, you talk about the Eagles too much. But they were Super Bowl champions, and they're in our backyard. So Bryce Huff, world champion Bryce Huff. They traded him to the San Francisco 49ers. The main thing was they're picking up $9 million of his salary for this season. I think they got, some contingency type draft picks coming back the Eagles' way, depending on his performance and playing time. But is that a big loss for the Eagles, Bryce Huff? To me, he's another one of those ultimate disappointments, a guy that was signed and he just couldn't get it done at Eagles Green.
Nah, that's one of those things where it's like good riddance. You don't want to be here. We don't want you here. You're not going to get any playing time because you don't put the effort in that you want playing time. So definitely a change of venue for both teams, I think, is helpful. At the same time, how many times have you seen guys go to a city they don't like, then go to another city and they start balling out again? So it's going to be one of those things. Was it the situation in Philadelphia, or is he just done and he just wants to collect checks?
Yeah, it's interesting because I always think about that. Think about a guy I covered and I used to kill him on his coverage for the Eagles, Kirk Coleman. Remember how bad he was for the Eagles? He couldn't cover anybody. Then he goes to Carolina, and I think he led the NFL in interceptions, makes a Pro Bowl, and you're like, oh man, was I wrong about this guy? After a couple of years, he kind of came back down to earth. But it's just crazy, as you're saying. Sometimes a new venue is good for some players, and conversely, sometimes a guy's fastball is left where he left. Look at Nick Foles. Nick Foles left the Eagles. He went to the Rams. He went to the Jaguars and a couple other stops. and he was just never the same guy as he was with the Eagles. He just always had the magic when he was with the Eagles, and he won that Super Bowl.
Yeah, and it's one of the things with Nick Foles that was so weird is he did it twice in Philadelphia. And it didn't mean like then he'd leave and go somewhere else, and he wasn't any good. Then he'd come back to Philadelphia, wins the Super Bowl, leaves Philadelphia. All of a sudden he's a bum again. So I think I'll put it this way: there's an NBA version, I believe, of Nick Foles, and he's called Al Horford. He would sit there for the Celtics, killing the Sixers, killing the Sixers. What do the Sixers do? They go get Al Horford. He stinks. They get rid of Al Horford. He goes back to Boston, starts balling out, wins another ring. So I mean, there's just those scenarios like that sometimes.
Yeah, it's crazy. And looking at the Eagles situation, 13-4 last season. Obviously, they had a great run in the playoffs, beating Green Bay. They beat the Rams in the snow. That was a tough game. Get your take on that. And then Washington, they took care of business on it, dominated them after a lot of people picked against them and said Jane Daniels is new thing. And then Kansas City, you know, we had Ray Dinger on, and I picked against the Eagles, and I heard from all my friends and family, and I said, "Oh boy," I thought Kansas City got the three-peat, but they dominated on it. So when we look at this Eagles team, a lot of defections this offseason. Mekhi Becton goes to the Chargers. Milton Williams goes to the Patriots. Josh Sweat to Arizona. They make the trade for CJ, GJ going to Houston. Um, and then I'll throw in Isaiah Rogers goes to Minnesota. So there are a lot of movement on this roster, and then Brandon Graham retires. So are all these defections going to hurt them, or do they have that good core nucleus to build upon that everybody's talking about from the last couple drafts?
I think it could have been worse. They could have lost more key guys that, if they would have lost certain other linchpin guys, it would hurt them more. These guys, why you don't want to lose guys from a Super Bowl winning team, it's evident. But at the same time, they can survive without them because you know why? They've got Stoutland U there. They can throw guys on that offensive line, and they've shown that they can get something out of them, and he can motivate those guys and get them performing in ways they haven't done before. So I give Stoutland the benefit of the doubt and the Eagles on this be able to fill holes.
Yeah, and a big one I want to talk about is defection slash changes. Obviously, Kellen Moore goes down to the Saints. He's their head coach, the offense coordinator position. Kevin Patullo, who's their passing coordinator, so he's involved in that attack going through. He becomes the offense coordinator. I don't know a lot about him. Obviously, there's always that question: is Sirianni calling the plays, or now with Kevin Patullo? You know, how is he going to interact with Jalen Hurts? That's the biggest thing. You have Brian Johnson, who knew Jalen Hurts from back in the day, and that just did not work out in 2023. Is this situation where he's going to have to get acclimated to Patullo? Do you see this working?
I think the one thing that works in Jalen Hurts' favor is he's used to change in offensive coordinator positions. He's used to a new guy coming in, and this is how I want to do it, and everything else. Jalen going for him, though, is the fact he's got a Super Bowl ring and some clout. He's like, this is how I want to do it. And it's no longer, Jalen, we want you to do this. Jalen can step into the room and be like, this is how I want to do it. I've been to 2 Super Bowls. I've won a Super Bowl. I know what works. So I think you're going to see that version of Jalen going forward.
Yes, he's very confident, and this off season he just seemed in control. He just seemed, he seems in a good place. As you said, he won the Super Bowl. He won the MVP. Quieted all his doubters, particularly the way he played. It wasn't like it was a ride along championship, like Jim McMahon back in '85 with the Bears, So he was a true cog of this team. He hit all those deep passes, and I he's the unquestioned leader now. The thing is, can he shut up the naysayers? This week I had a lot of people pinging me, emailing me, Eagles people saying, what's up with Chris Sims? He puts Jalen Hurts number 10 in his list. I know we touched on this last week, but to me, he's at least top five. Yeah, you can make a case for Mahomes is better than him, and Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP. But, Joe Burrow, he has not won a Super Bowl. Okay? Uh, and I think that's a big differentiation tool. So much ado about nothing about Chris Sims and his ratings, or should Jalen Hurts take this to heart?
Chris Sims is a boxer that should stay down. He keeps getting up. It's like, dude, stay down on this one. You've lost this one. It's over. Somebody, Phil Sims needs to throw the white towel in at Chris and be like, all right, we're done here. No, nothing to see here. Like, step into him like he's Mills Lane breaking up a fight or something like that. Chris Sims looks nothing more than a fool the more he brings up Jalen Hurts' name and tries to put down Jalen Hurts. Until, like we talked about before, until Burrow wins the Super Bowl, until Josh Allen wins the Super Bowl, Lamar wins the Super Bowl, those guys haven't done it. I know they had to get past, the Chiefs to do it. You know who got to the Chiefs twice now? Jalen Hurts. He beat him once already. So until those guys can get to that level, I'm prone to put Jalen ahead of them.
Yeah, and I always hear Justin Herbert, the guy who looks great in the uniform, he has his great stats and everything. The other guy does not have hardly any playoff success, and that's the differentiation thing. When you're putting all these quarterbacks in a list or looking at who's going to win in the postseason when the games matter most. Who do you want to have the ball in his hands? And Hurts has proven he's the man. You want him to have the ball in his hands, and uh, he's moved himself up. So he's not Mahomes, but he's in the conversation with those top five guys. And yeah, I think it's just laughable. Chris Sims, a guy who I think he said Jalen Hurts was going to be a gadget guy coming out of college, and he didn't really believe in him, et cetera. And he's just never backed off his criticism of him ever since. And yeah, you're right. He looks kind of stupid.
Yeah.
To me, he looks like a nepotism
Hmm.
at his best. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Somehow his name has bigger credentials than his resume. But we move on here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9, the Game Coast Sports Network. We'll look at the Eagles roster heading into training camp, and we'll just highlight some of these different areas. The offense was dominant. They put up 463 points last year, which was 27.2, number seven in the league. Their defense obviously was a calling card, only allowed 17.8 points per game. In division 5-1, and we saw Washington kind of say, okay, maybe we can beat. They beat them that one time, but the Eagles are dominant in division. Do you think they're still the kings of that division going into camp?
Yes. Yes. Short answer on that one. Yes. Washington, and we've talked about it with other quarterbacks in the past. It's the sophomore slump. It's all the tape that's on you now, or film. You can kick it old school, and we're using those kind of words now. Geez, showing my age. But at the same time, Jaden Daniels, it's another year in the league. They're going to have more information about you. They're going to be planning differently for you. And the question is, can he adapt to that now? Can he, on the fly, all of a sudden change his game up? And that's going to be what we need to see in year two out of him. But do I like Washington still? Sure. Sure. And it goes back to the back to back division champions. It's been so long since the Andy Reid Eagles. And I was talking with Nate earlier this week about it, and I wouldn't bet against Washington winning that division just for that little record alone, because I'm big on those kind of numbers kind of thing. It's like there's a reason why it's like that. So I wouldn't bet against Washington win the division, but Philadelphia has to be clear cut the number one right now.
Yeah, and right now I'd have to say you put money on it. I'd say they're going to break that streak somehow. They're going to win that division because when you just look at the rosters, it's just like okay, they just have way more talent than everybody. Obviously, health was such a big thing last season for the Eagles. They didn't have a lot of big injuries, and they had their full complement of players going into Super Bowl 59. So that's going to be a big thing to watch. We talked about the defections. The over under on win total for them is 11 and a half. I tend to think they can get to 12. What are you thinking?
I think we were talking about it before. I think it's right at 12. I think the schedule is more difficult for them this year, and you have to worry about a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover perhaps when they first get there. Trying to hit the button to get everything set again. Coming off the buffet tour of the Super Bowl, we'll see how Sirianni has them ready to go. But I think 12 is about right. I think they hit the over, but just barely.
Yes, and they got some tough games. I was looking at their schedule, so we can go through some of these. Week one, obviously they're putting the banner up. The fans are all excited. They're going to have Dallas Cowboys September 4th. Everybody's got that date circled, so we're about, I guess, 80, high 80 some days away from that game. It'll be on NBC. I tend to think they beat Dallas, but then they have to go to Kansas City. It's a Sunday 4:25 start on Fox, so it's a national game. I wish they had moved it later in the season, but is that a game? Is Andy really got it circled on his calendar? He's got barbecue sauce on it. He's eating his sandwich. He's looking at that date on the calendar. Is 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 this really a game to really worry about? I know the most important thing is don't start 0-3 because as the Bengals know, once you start 0-3, your season's pretty much kaput. But this week 2 game against Kansas City, I know the Chiefs will be favored, but what are we thinking in terms of that? Is that a big matchup, something to look forward to?
I think Kansas City needs that game more than Philadelphia, just for the sheer offensive and defensive display that Philadelphia put on against them in that Super Bowl. They took their confidence in that game. There's no doubt about it. They couldn't do anything on either side of the ball except for some garbage stuff at the end of the game. So they need to come out to prove to themselves that they can play with those guys that they played with against, earlier in the beginning of 2025. If the Eagles go in there and win that game, that team might just mentally have it blocked now that they can't beat the Eagles.
Yeah, it's going to be the big thing is can they block the Eagles pass rush? I know Sweat's gone and Brandon Graham, but the Eagles still have all his fastballs for Vic Fangio and Mahomes. That line's a work in progress. They use their first round draft pick on a guy out of Ohio State and they trade Thuney. They're sliding some things around. So yeah, that's a game I got circled on the Eagles calendar. Week 3, they have the Rams in Philadelphia, so a rematch game there. Obviously, there won't be no snow. Uh, then they have to go to Tampa Bay, so they'll be down there with Angel and them. I guess Angel and they'll all be getting sighted down Tampa Joe's, but that's a tough game for the Eagles because Baker seems to have their number and is particularly in Tampa. So week 4, is that something to worry about? Pothole for the Eagles?
Oh God, yeah. I think that it's just always been a matchup problem with the Eagles. For some reason, playing Tampa, it didn't matter even when they lost the game at the Vet when Donovan's in the championship game. It's like they've just had problems with Tampa over the years. And the Eagles, and I'm saying this, it's like I would consider myself fortunate to come out of the first 4 games 2-2.
And sometimes they do start slow. You saw last year, but they lost to the Falcons, and then or they yeah, they lost to the Falcons because Saquon dropped the ball, and then they go down to the Saints, and they almost lose that game. Last second interception kind of turned that game around, but it was tooth and nail type of game. So the Eagles definitely cannot be smelling the flowers anymore. The funny thing was, I heard the ring ceremony has been pushed back. They haven't even given their rings yet to the guys. Uh, they're probably going to have to figure that out. But as you get closer to training camp, they need to put last season in the rear view. Yes, it was a season for the ages, but they're no longer the champions, and everybody starts from ground zero. Now, in terms of talking about champions, I think it was the DeJean uh, podcast, and they were saying the Eagles were the top 5 all-time team. The 2024 Eagles are our top. I see your face.
No.
That's recency bias. I tend to think there's been so many great teams that I've seen throughout my life, but to say they're top 5, I think it's a little bit stretch.
That's some Gen Z stuff right there. That is all it is. It's like, oh yeah, guys, once again, it's like the basketball thing. Oh, they're a bunch of plumbers and everything else that they played against. It's like, no, these are some of the most dominant teams of all time. And no, Philadelphia was a great season. But in perspective, I mean, we could sit there and probably just rattle off. They're not in the top 10.
Yeah, and I tend to think some of Bill Walsh's teams from the Niners are some of the best. I hate to say it, some of the Cowboys from the '90s, they're probably some of the best teams, and then the Steelers in the '70s, and the Patriots early on. They had 2 separate type 3-peats with Belichick. Some confluence of 3 titles in like 3, 4, 5 years. But they were just dominant. So I think the Eagles just had a great season. A lot of things fell their way. Playing a rookie quarterback in the championship game that kind of helped out, and the road was through their stadium. So I tend to say great season, but I wouldn't put them in the top 5 in terms of teams all time. So uh, a little hyperbole from some of the Birds fans out there. I know they're going to get mad at me, and I got my family reunion coming up, and they're all going to probably say, "Oh, What's the matter with you? You hate the Eagles. My one cousin, she always that's the first thing she leads with. She always says, "You hate the Eagles. I hear you talking about, you know." But I got to give the facts. I can't just blindly and say, "Oh, root for the laundry and they're going to win every week and all that." But very good team. But yeah, I wouldn't put them in that top echelon. I think a big thing for the Eagles coming up in this 2025 season, their bye week's week 9, which kind of is it's that's right about in the middle of everything, and they'll have the opportunity. It's not too early, it's not too late in the season. Do you think that's a good time for the Eagles to have their bye?
It's always subjective once the season starts. So say you get out of the gate and you're like 2-4 or something. It's like, man, we really need a bye week right now, and it's like you get some guys banged up early. But on the grand scheme of it, I think nine's fine. I think nine's perfect. It lets everyone, about halfway through there catch a breather a little bit, and you can reset and see what you did in the first half of the season, what you can change for the second half. So yeah, I think that's a good landing spot for them.
Yeah, and then the back nine, it's going to be interesting. Some games, yeah, they're at Green Bay in Week 10, which is Monday night football game. They host Detroit, which is a game I want to kind of feature when it comes around Week 11. That's a Sunday night football game. And then the big thing, Kevin, I want to get your take on it is the last 3 games of the season, which I think 12 wins. They may be scratching 10, be around 10, around 11 wins, and they may need to get that last one to win the division. So week 16 at Washington, it's either 4:30 or 8 p.m. That's a Saturday game on Fox. Then week 17, they're at Buffalo. That's a Sunday 4:25 game, and then we'll see about week 18. They host Washington. So, do you think that stretch, those last 3 games, are going to be critical for the Birds?
The last one remains to be seen. I tell you what, though, you go with those first 4 games and those last 3 games, they better win some games in the middle. I mean, that's a rough way to start, and it's a rough way to end the season. It's like you need to win a lot of games and get a lot of meat off that bone in the middle of the season. I still don't know whether or not that last game's gonna. I just don't like it. I don't like the fact they did Washington, twice in the last 3 games. I think it's bad for the NFL. I think it's bad for the fans who want to watch competitive football, and you might get that clunker at the end that's a flexed out game. But I mean, we'll see. It should be because I don't see Washington also going. I don't see Washington winning 13, 14, 15 games. They're going to probably be around there. They'll probably be anywhere from 10 to 12 also. So yeah, we might have a football game there.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you that they got to take care of business against these bad teams. Like they played the Giants week 6 on a Thursday night. They got to take care of that game. I know it's going to be a short week for the Eagles, and then they play the Giants week 8. So those are the type of games they got to get it done in, and they have some tough opposition. So it's not going to be easy road. They're going to be the hunted. We're talking about Lloyd Vance's. We're talking about the Eagles here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. Thanks for joining us. Uh, we'll quickly look at their roster, the Eagles, before we move on to other topics. Receiver. They have A.J. Brown. They got Devontae Smith. Is there going to be a third receiver? You always see a lot of, and then everybody says they got the best duo and one of the best duos in the league, but they need a third guy to step up. Jahan Dotson, traded for him from Washington. Is he the answer, or you know, uh, there's really not a lot after him. Is they have Terrence Marshall coming in. They have Johnny Wilson, who they're trying to throw the fade to, but he kind of he's reminding me of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Do they have a third receiver on his
They
team?
haven't, they haven't had a third receiver for years. Dotson, when they first actually got Dotson last year, I was like, all right, now it might have something here. Then you saw it was weird. He'd have like 3 or 4 looks at him like in the first quarter to the second quarter. Then you wouldn't see him the rest of the game again. It was one of those they were trying to feed him the ball, trying to get him into the mix. He had the one nice catch in the Super Bowl. Actually, almost had the
Right.
touchdown, but nah, he's not legit. They still don't have a legit number 3, and we're gonna have to see if somebody steps up in camp, or someone falls off and gets cut, or there's a salary cap casualty.
Yeah, and I know the team is hoping that Aeneas Smith, they drafted him in the 5th round in 2024. He's kind of banged up last season. Maybe he can step forward, but yeah, I tend to agree with you that maybe they try to look for somebody on a waiver wire. But they did invest a lot in Dotson. They traded some picks for him. He's got to step up. I did like him at Penn State, but he just never kind of, you know, was the man and be that second guy that Washington needed. And then they kind of just said, all right, Philly, you take him. The offensive line, the core of the Eagles, obviously, you have Jordan Mailata, you have Landon Dickerson back, Cam Jurgens. They're all Pro Bowlers or all pros, kind of like that. The right guard spot is going to be interesting. Tyler Steen, who they've tried to give the position to for quite some time, a 2023 third rounder, he's there. They got Matt Pryor coming back. Um, Trevor Keegan, and then they have Kendall Lamb coming over from Miami, um, and then I think they traded for from Houston. They bring over Kenyon Green as well. So is Tyler Steen going to be that new guy in the offensive line there to replace Mekhi Becton?
They're definitely hoping he is, but like I said, Stoutland, he can bring somebody in there. He can sit there, and knock a little of the scuff off him and everything off with somebody who's a little rough around the edges. And he can, especially with the other guys you have on that line. They're not asking you to do a lot. There's guys on both sides of you can probably help you out a lot. So basically, he makes these guys look better with the talent around him and the coaching style that he has. So I have faith in Stoutland to get this done.
Yes, and then you have Lane Johnson at right tackle, and two guys to keep your eye on. They drafted them; they're huge guys. Cameron Williams, 6'6" plus guy in the sixth round out of Texas. They have him on their roster, and then they have Miles Hinton, son of Chris Hinton, who was a pretty good offensive lineman back in the day. They also got him in the sixth round. He's from Michigan, so they're bringing in these big guys in. You're right, Stoutland. They're counting on him, and what he did with Becton was tremendous because Becton was on a trash heap from the Jets were done with him. He was a first round draft pick, supposed to be a franchise left tackle. Didn't work out there, but they put him on that right side, and that's where Saquon was getting his yards behind Becton and Johnson. They were just blasting holes. So I think the offensive line be in good shape. Dallas Goedert, he gets a pay cut at the tight end position. Is he going to be happy, unhappy? I mean, he seemed to want to stay with the Eagles more than pursuing a trade to somewhere else. So he's back at tight end. Then you have Calcaterra, and then you bring in Kellen Granderson, who's another one of these in space tight ends. So is anybody going to step up there? Much like the receivers position, they need a number two tight end. Everybody's running these 12 sets where they run two good tight ends. Do the Eagles have that, or should they be looking around?
Oh, they should be looking around. No, they don't have that. The one thing is, though, these guys, the backup tight ends and even the third option, they get opportunities because Goddard can't stay on the field, and they're going to get opportunities again this year. There will be a time, some point during the season, where Dallas Goddard's going to miss 2, 3 games, and that's when you're going to have to see. It's like, all right, did you do enough at the tight end position? And we'll see. We'll see. We'll find out. But do I think they did? No.
Yeah, and I tend to think they've also brought in Harrison Barton, who used to, he was a starter one time at Cleveland, kind of flamed out, and he was with the Raiders last year. But I think he's on the back end of his career. We'll see if Anderson or one of these guys can step up, but that may be a position they need to look at as teams make their cuts. Maybe they bring in somebody in because they do need better blocking, in my opinion, from that tight end position to help Saquon and that offensive line. Obviously, quarterback. You have Jalen Hurts. We already talked about him at nauseum in terms of, he's the man, the Super Bowl MVP. There's no question about that. Now, behind him, though, there's always Tanner McKee. He's guys I talk to that cover the camp on a regular basis. He's the latest Coy Detmer. He looks great in camp. Tanner McKee could be a starter someplace else. I hear that kind of talk from diehard Eagles fans. I think he's just a guy. So you have him, and then you have Kyle McCord from St. Joe's Prep. They brought him over from Syracuse. He was also at Ohio State. But the guy I want to kind of get your take on in this mix is Dorian Thompson Robinson. Everybody calls him DTR. They bring him over from Cleveland. I got to cover the game between the Eagles and the Browns preseason game last year. He was running around making some plays and this and that. But kind of inconsistent, like an Anthony Richardson type. So is DTR, is he going to be in a mix, or is he just, somebody brought over for a camp body?
A little from column A, a little from column B. I mean, with a backup quarterback, You can get by for a week or two with a backup quarterback. It doesn't matter for the most part who it is. It's like just hand the ball off a lot. Don't throw interceptions. Kenny Two Gloves looked all right as a backup in limited role. But to sit there and have somebody out there for 3 to 4 games, then you're going to find out that you don't have a good backup quarterback. And I don't think he's good. He couldn't play in Cleveland. He was erratic out there, and they have 5 quarterbacks out there now, which is why he's over, somewhere else. If Tanner McKee's that guy, though, once again, what's the sexiest position in football? The backup quarterback. You get to wear the little red jersey, mesh jersey. No one hits you. You sit there with a clipboard, best seat in the house, and you go in there and throw one complete pass, and it's like, oh, he could start somewhere. Oh, he could play for somebody, And the lineage of Don Strock and even Mitchell from Miami when he stepped in for Marino and got signed by Detroit for that big deal, and he stunk. So I mean, it's always the backup quarterback. It always looks good.
Yeah, and I always think of AJ Feely. I used to cover the Eagles when he was a backup, and AJ. Everybody always said he almost beat the Patriots at one time. He came in there and played lights out. I think it was a Sunday night football game, and
Hmm.
everybody was excited about him. Who got excited about him? The Miami Dolphins. They traded, I think, a second rounder for him, and he was his usual terrible self. A guy who looked great in a uniform, held the clipboard. I heard he's a scratch golfer. A lot of these backup guys are. But in terms of being, the franchise quarterback that come in there and win games, no, that was not him. So we'll see about these backup quarterbacks. Running back, Saquon Barkley, for the ages, a season for the ages, and let's say, all right, he's not getting 2,000, but can he get 1,500? Is he healthy enough? Is he going to be focused? He's going on the banquet circuit too. He's been on a lot of these shows. I believe he was the guy that was talking about the Eagles as a top 5 all-time team, and he said some other things that kind of rankle people some other ways. But is Saquon going to get 1,500 yards? And at backup, they brought in AJ Dillon, who had a stinger injury with his neck with the Green Bay Packers that kind of they were like, all right, let him go because I don't know if he's going to be able to come back from it, but he's in the mix. And then you have Will Shipley. So talk a little bit about these running backs.
A healthy AJ Dillon, I like. I liked AJ Dillon when he was with Green Bay. I thought, he was that guy who could maybe challenge if he got enough carries. You thought could be the number one guy for somebody, but coming off the injury, and I mean, I'll take him as my number two. I have no problem with AJ Dillon. A healthy AJ Dillon as a number two, I think, is a great pickup for the Eagles. Saquon, if he doesn't get 1,500, the Eagles are in trouble. He's got to get 15. I mean, when you get to like 17, 18, 19, I mean, you're talking unbelievable seasons at that point. But 15, he's at least 14. Like, he's got to be in that neighborhood for that team to be successful. And we've talked about before, you just worry about the wear and tear on his body over the years, the history of injury, the fact that he got off last year without the injury problem. Is it laying around the corner? So we'll see. But A.J. Dillon and, Shipley is a third. I'm okay with that. He's a guy, at that point, and we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, and Shipley's a fourth rounder, and I think a lot of guys get excited about him here and there. But I think he's a good, you know, stopgap guy, a third down receiver, help on special teams, much like the Ty Johnson that's doing for the Buffalo Bills. Good change of pace guy here and there. You get him about 10 carries or less, and then mix. But he'll make the roster. But yeah, I think it's Saquon or bust, and they got to keep him healthy. AJ Dillon, I'll be watching him in camp. We'll see how he's able to come back from that stinger injury. Defensive line, they got Ty Robinson coming over from Nebraska in the fourth round. A lot of people are excited about him. Jordan Davis, he actually played with physicality and emotion last year at the nose tackle position. They kept him around and picked up his fifth-year option. Defensive tackle, Jalen Carter, all world, all pro, kind of coming into his own. Total steal for the Eagles. And then at the other end or outside rusher, you have Nolan Smith, who just came on like a house on fire. He's a smaller guy, but he knows how to get to quarterback. So D line, anything to worry about there with obviously Sweat leaving, going to Arizona, or Brandon Graham retiring?
The Brandon Graham one, I think just for an emotional standpoint in that locker room, that's he was that gel guy. He was a glue guy that everyone leaned on, or he would even insert himself so everyone wouldn't have to worry or wonder what they were going to be doing. He would sit there and assure them what was going on. with Sweat and like even Milton Williams, it's like certain guys. It's like, did you want to pay them money? Did you want what kind of money were you looking to lock into them? And I have no problems with the Eagles not doing it. You know, there's money to be spent elsewhere, so I'm okay with that. We're going to see what Jordan Davis's off-season program looks like and how physically how he looks and conditioning how he looks, and go with that. Jalen Carter, I mean, the way people are talking, and I'm not that far off of it, to be honest. I mean, are you getting another like Donald Sue situation, early days, Stubblefield, Cortez Kenny, like one of those defensive tackle guys that could sit there and hold it down on a Pro Bowl level? And that's what I think the Eagles might actually have.
Yeah, and Carter's so good. It's almost like when they had Reggie White, whoever they got next to him. That guy's going to have a career year. I know Mike Golick and um, Pitts and Clyde the Glide the most. Simmons. He was so happy to have a guy because he's getting 2, 3 guys every snap. And the thing is about Carter, he's just dominant. He's just breaking through those double teams, and he's in the backfield getting TFLs all the time. So, a guy. The thing you're gonna have to worry about him, they're gonna have to pay him.
Oh yeah.
He's going to be in the market for 33 million per season coming up, and that's going to be something. He's coming on year 3. They're probably going to have to start looking at, okay, maybe renegotiate with him. And like any young player who's at the top of his game, I'm sure he's finding out what all his friends are making, his agents talking to people. And you may be talking about a holdout situation with him next year, where he's like, I want my money. And then the Eagles have a lot of money tied up in, we talked about A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley. So a lot of money tied up on that side of the ball. They're lucky enough now that they have some younger guys on defense that they don't have to pay. Linebacker, Zach Bourne got paid. Is that a good thing, bad thing? Is he a one-year wonder? And then we'll talk about the other linebackers.
Zach Bond getting paid, I'll call it unprecedented for the Eagles to spend money on a linebacker. And actually, he might be the linchpin to see whether the Eagles ever pay a linebacker ever again. Because it's like, we did it one time. Look what happened. He had one good year. So I'm glad they re-signed him, though. I thought he deserved to be re-signed because it's like they can't. I mean, for the better part of a decade to two, we're just going to plug another linebacker in. We're just going to plug another linebacker in. It's like some continuity. A guy that you have like that can take over and lead that linebacker core. I'm happy for it.
Yeah, and next is Zach Bond, who had that career year. He's getting up in age, but I think they're going to be happy with his linebacking crew again. Particularly playing behind Davis, who can take up with the blockers, and then you have Jalen Carter, just this disruptor, and they can play off of that. Jacoby Dean, another one of the Georgia Bulldog Eagles, he has a very bad knee injury. They're hoping he's coming back from it. They're bringing in Jihad Campbell, who could be the steal of this draft, another SEC guy. We talked about that being the minor league, National Football League. Comes from Alabama in the first round. Now, there are questions about his shoulder and his knee. So, what are your feelings on Dean? Can he come back? And is Campbell the steal that everybody thinks he is?
I think with Dean, you have to tread lightly. You don't want to rush that kid back. You've seen it many times before. Even go to Carson Wentz. You rush somebody back. Who's not ready to be back, and they sit there and they injure themselves even worse. I would take my time with him. Whatever you get from him, you get from him. You basically, in my mind, you plan on playing without him for most, at least half the season, see where he's at and everything. Let him work his own way back. As far as the draft pick, though, it's who was the kid they drafted? The cornerback, was it? Oh shoot, Sydney.
Oh, Sidney
So,
Jones, yeah, from
yeah. Oh,
Washington.
that's
Yeah,
the one. What, Achilles injury, I believe, something like that. I
yeah,
thought when the Eagles got him, I was like, oh, that's the one. That was a steal right there. Nah, there was a reason. He was injured, and he never became that player. So sometimes it's like you're taking 50 cents on the dollar on some of these guys when you draft them, with the injury history and everything. And especially with 2 injuries, we'll see what happens. But healthy wise, everything you read on paper, you've seen, the highlights and everything. He's a baller.
yeah. He's a flat out stud, and uh, the Eagles are hoping they got another steal, which they could have. Howie Roseman, a guy who I killed for a lot of years, a lot of bad draft picks. He's done a great job in terms of just mining the SEC lately, and we'll see what Jahad Campbell what he brings to the table. Cornerbacks will be interesting, Kevin. I want to get your take on this around the NFL. We'll look at training camp battles soon. Left corner is going to be interesting. You know, we have the Eagles have Q Mitchell on the one side, a dominant player, but Kaylee Ringo, another one of the Georgia Bulldogs, is he going to be able to step up to that position as a starter? Is it going to be a Dory Jackson, who I didn't think he had much left for the Giants? He's in the mix. And then I'm hearing from fans, one of my emailers is like, what about Jaheir Alexander, who got cut recently by the Packers? Should they think about signing him?
If they can make the money work and everything, I would. I mean, I don't think Ringo's that guy. I just don't. I mean, I could be completely wrong. I have in the past. I will in the future. But I don't. I wouldn't lay all my trust in Ringo. No.
Yeah, I think Ringo's better as special teams, dime. Um, but yeah, I just don't know if he's a true shutdown outside corner. Dory Jackson, a little up there in age. I think why not take a flyer on Alexander, a guy who they probably could get on the cheap, and Quinyon Mitchell is going to take the tough assignment on their side. He's another guy. You talk about these young guys just blossoming, and he's young, he could be that Pro Bowl or the perennial guy. We just saw Eric Allen for the Philadelphia Eagles go into the Hall of Fame. Maybe Q Mitchell can be that cornerstone corner the Eagles have been looking for some time. So we'll see about that. Safety. This is the big one. Well, Cooper DeJean, I think he's best at nickel. I think he's great there in terms of making tackles out of the slot. They can blitz him. He can do a variety of things. I don't know about moving him to the outside. I heard one guy on the radio talking about maybe he could be outside corner, but I think he's better at nickel. What do you think in terms of, DeJean?
I agree with you. Actually, I like him in the middle. I like him being able to get the guys, stopping plays right there. I think that's where he's most well suited to play in that. And I wouldn't want to just sit there and put him on the outside, because I think you're just giving up too much in the middle.
Yeah, and he's such a good tackler. He's almost like another linebacker in there, another strong safety. So why not use that ability? And he's good at covering the tight ends as well. So I think the Eagles probably leave him there. Vic Fangio, obviously, he's going to have to switch the playbook up. We talk about year two, and people kind of look at the tendencies. But I think he's going to use Cooper DeJean in a variety of ways. Safety, another one of these training camp battles where, a lot of people are going to be looking at. Sidney Brown is there. You like his feistiness, but sometimes a little too pushy shovey for me. He's in the mix. You also have Reed Blankenship, a guy who gets interceptions, but sometimes he can get burned a little bit here and there. And now they have Andrew Makuba coming from University of Texas in the second round. More of a ball hawk guy. He's not very big, and I just don't know what he's going to bring as a tackler. A lot of people are already comparing him to Gardner Johnson. But what do you think in terms of the safety position?
I think they have some options at least. It's not like they're just throwing guys out there. They got two guys that can play a little bit, and then you got a rookie who can come in there who's going to try to prove himself and everything else. Once again, from another big school, and that's he's played against quality opponents. So I think at least that's one of those battles you can let training camp dictate who wins that. You have that option at least.
Yeah. All right, there was your Eagles deep dive here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. All my emailers, Byron from California, my cousins in Philly, Gwen, Kevin, all you can leave me alone. That's Kevin Vance, not Kevin Midgette. But yeah, it's much to look forward to going to the Eagles camp this July, and it'll be at their facility, but I know they're going to have practice at the link here and there for the public. So one other thing in terms of the Eagles, the big success was the tush push. I talked to Nate about this a couple weeks. I want to get your take on this. They voted, obviously the Packers didn't want it anymore, but there was only 22 votes. There was not 24 votes of the owners to pass. What do you say about the tush push? Is it here to stay, or is it just sticking around for a little while? And does it give the Eagles an unfair advantage?
All right, let's address this one by one. We'll knock it off. Do I think Green Bay and a bunch of the other teams are a bunch of whiners? Absolutely. Do I like the tush push? I hate it. I loathe it. I've stood on that soapbox for years now. I am not a fan of the tush push, even though it benefits the team I technically root for. I mean, but nobody can stop it. Other teams try to run it. That's the thing. They don't have the ability on the line or the quarterback that can sit there and squat 600 pounds and push himself into the mix. And that's the problem. That's why I'm glad they kept it, just for the fact that the other teams try. If you don't want it, then don't try it yourself. Then, it's like then you just outlaw the play. It's like that kind of thing. It's like you're trying, you just can't do it. So the fact that the Eagles, they kept it in, I think if you watch, if the Eagles went back to back and won another Super Bowl, that thing's gone. There's no way they're keeping that thing in. So I'm surprised it's still here, to be honest.
Yeah, and I agree with you that the other teams need to stop whining. Yeah, I don't like to play. It's not my favorite thing, but stop them. You know what I mean? It's like anything. If you don't like, where they use some of those stack formations, and they used to always say McVay and the Rams, they did a lot of crossing patterns where they were kind of clipping the DB and catching the ball in stride and all that obstruction plays. They used to call them rubs and all that, but uh, look, you got to stop it. And the Eagles, to their credit, I looked this up. 2024, they were 39 out of 48 on the tush push, which is a little over 81%. But you also got to factor Nate's team. The Bills do it very well too. In 2024, they were 16 to 17. We know they didn't get the one that mattered in the playoffs against KC, but you know, stop them. And the owners, obviously, Jeffrey Lloyd. I don't know if you heard about his impassioned speech he gave, and then they even brought Kelsey up there. Kelsey's now a media guy. You know, but yeah, we'll see about the tush push. We'll leave it at that. And we're here in Lloyd Vance, Insider Football on 102.9, the Game Coast Sports Network. Uh, Kevin, we got to talk about holdouts, and now it's hold in. You know what I mean? A lot of these guys, they hold in where they go to camp and they say, "Oh, my hamstrings hurt." I can't practice today, coach. They're under contract, they're not getting fined, but they're not practicing. But we'll see if that's going to be hold in position come training camp. But talk about some of these holdouts, and we'll kind of go through them, and you can give your take on them. Trey Hendrickson for the Cincinnati Bengals. I actually feel bad for him. 17 and a half sacks. Mike Brown and the Bengals are cheap, and they should pay him. I know they pay T. Higgins, they pay Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, but their best guy on defense, a defense that needs some teeth, they need to pay him.
That might be the cheapest organization in all of sports anyway. Football, at least. They never spend money for anything, and then they drop some coin on Burrow and Chase, and it's like, nope, sorry, the ATM's closed. We have no more money. That guy needs to be paid. It's like, what are you doing? The guy, I want to say he's around 30 right now. 29, 30 years old.
Right.
And it's like you could have that guy for the next 5, 6 years being a solid all pro, leading the league in sacks guy. And you're thinking about letting him walk. And I guess they're starting to talk again, which is a good sign. But it's like, what are you doing? Don't nickel and dime that guy. Lock him up.
Right. I agree with you. The Bengals again, and this one's weird too because rookie contracts are basically slotted now. Some players aren't even getting an agent. You saw Lamar Jackson in the past, his mom negotiated his first contract. Cincinnati Bengals rookie defensive end Shamar Stewart, they're playing hardball with him. They wanted him to get rid of certain guarantees and future options that are standard in these rookie contracts. Only the Bengals would ask any rookie to do this, and it would set a precedent. So you can't blame Stewart for saying, no, I'm not signing. So is this going to be resolved, and how's this look?
It's a bad look for Cincinnati, but they're used to it. It's like, and he has to say no because the fact is the whole league is watching him. If he does it, then they're going to come at all the other guys, all the future guys coming in. He, on principle alone, he has to stay in there and say no, and what happens, happens.
Yeah, and we're talking holdouts here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029, the Coast Sports Network. Glad you could join Kevin and I this evening. We'll talk about a couple more. Micah Parsons, your Dallas Cowboys. Is Jerry Jones going to re-sign Micah Parsons? To Parsons' credit, he has shown up at mini camps and he's played the good soldier, but is this going to get ugly? I mean, they need to pay him. Obviously, they've handcuffed themselves because they paid Dak $60 million plus per season. Is this going to get done?
No. No, I don't think it is. They sit there, they put all this money on the offensive end. You have one of the best players in football on the defensive side of the ball, and he's been not so shy about hinting, oh, playing for other teams. He's like, oh, yeah, playing for them. Oh, that must be great and everything else. And he's not shy on his podcast either. So if this does turn ugly, he's going to have a forum which to just drill that team and that owner until they either get rid of him or they sign him.
Yeah, it's. I tend to agree with that. It's going to keep being a soap opera. Jerry Jones, wink, wink. Oh, I'm working. We're working on it. We're working on it. They've been working on it for over a season and a half, and Micah Parsons and his agent and investment team, they're probably going to start, causing some problems there. So that's something to keep an eye on. And obviously, how about them Cowboys? We'll see how that works out. One other one I wanted to get your take on is James Cook, Bills running back. I know Nate's got his eye on this one. Does he have a leg to stand on? I think he may have already acquiesced and came into camp. I don't even know if he's even held out yet. But what's James Cook? Is he going to get a contract?
I don't think it's at the forefront for him, to be honest. I mean, it's still basically what, a year and a half and 2 seasons basically of something to judge that guy on, to sit there and really throw a bunch of coin at him. So, I mean, do I think he's a good running back? Most definitely. But to sit there already and be like, I need to be paid, yeah, you're going to have to wait a little bit on that one. We got some other guys. We're trying to win a Super Bowl here. We're not trying to lock some money in to a young running back at this particular point, and he's not getting that. So, I mean, I don't know. If I'm Buffalo, I'm not paying him right now.
Yeah, I think I played a blinking game with him, and as I always say, the team has a hammer, and he's a piece of the offense. He's not the main part of the offense. Obviously, Josh Allen, they've taken care of him, and actually, I'm hearing he may get renegotiated again, and then they'll probably try to find a number one receiver. They do have Kenyon Coleman there, but they need somebody else to step forward. So I just don't know about Cook there. Um, Briefly before we head on to the NFC North preview, Kevin, fantasy football. I know you talk about it all the time. My son and you talk about it. I talk about it as well. I'm just going to run through the top 10. I went on Fantasy Football Today, a site that I use sometimes. I'll go through the top 10, and you can kind of say, okay, yes, no, like, Saquon Barkley, he's the number one pick. Would you take him? I would be worried about usage from last season, and he's got the Madden cover jinx. I mean, is that something to think about when you're picking fantasy? Is he the number one guy?
Saquon's fallen into my Christian McCaffrey kind of role right now. It's like I want somebody to pick him before it gets to me because I don't want to have to think about having to pick him or not. You don't want to be the guy who passed on him the year he doesn't get hurt, like last year if you passed on Saquon. McCaffrey's always that guy. It's like I know people. It's like I'm not drafting, and he fell to him, and they drafted him anyway because you didn't want to pass on him. So Saquon, would I draft him? No, and I hope I don't get the number one pick.
In that situation, I remember I've been playing long enough. Larry Johnson had the season for the ages, and I think I had to pick, and I took him. And he had a terrible season after he went off, and
Mm-hmm.
led fantasy football in points. I know Nate the one year was bragging on David Johnson. David Johnson, I got to get him. And he hurt his wrist in the first game. Somewhere the Cardinals. So you got to be careful with these running backs. So yeah, Saquon. Okay, maybe number one, but yeah, you got to worry about a couple things factored in there. Number two, Bijan Robinson, Atlanta Falcons. We've been kind of waiting for him. Mike Penix Jr. is now going to be the quarterback there. Drake London in the mix. Is Bijan going to break out and be the guy? I know a lot of people thought he would be coming out of Texas, and things started a little slow with the last coaching staff, and they got rid of those guys, and he's gotten a little bit more opportunities.
I'll tell you one thing. I did a couple of mock drafts the other day just for the fact, I got to get my, hitter's eye ready. It's got like 2 months here. And I had the third pick in the draft, and I took Bijan Robinson third overall because he was ranked actually on that one. He was ranked as the highest running back. It was
Well,
him, Gibbs, and Barkley like all bunched together. And I was like, I mean, it's mock. What do I care? But it was like, all right, I rolled the dice on Bijan on that first pick. Once again, I hope it doesn't come to me in my money draft, my money league, because once again, I don't want to be on the wrong side of that one. But for mock purposes, yeah, I took him there.
all right, yeah. Yeah, I think that may be appropriate because he's that great dual threat back, and he's not really sharing a lot now, and I know Raheem Mostert's there, but he's close to the end of his career, and I think it's going to be the Bijan Robinson show. He's going to get a lot of touches this season. Number three, Jameer Gibbs. Now he's thunder and lightning with Montgomery. Montgomery's coming back from that MCL injury. I think they work good as a tandem because when Gibbs kind of had to be the guy in the playoffs, you know, he's better like change of pace, catching the football rather than that down in, down out between the tackles type runner.
Yeah, I like Jameer Gibbs as well. And the thing is, when you draft someone like Jameer Gibbs or you drafted Montgomery, you're stuck into some games. They fall in love with the one back, and the other guy's not getting as many touches. So you got a starter out there, that's a pedestrian. So that's the one thing you have to think about when you're taking a combo back set like that.
Yeah, and yeah, that's always dangerous because one guy gets hotter, and then they use that used to happen all the time. I think it was like the Broncos used to do that all the
Mhm.
time to me. You say, "Oh, okay, it's this week. I'm definitely going to ride this guy," and then next thing you know, Sean Payton's not even getting 3 carries to your guy, and you're screaming at the TV.
Mhm.
Why'd I do that? Yeah, at 4, a guy I had last year, and he went off. A lot of people were like, "Oh, he's done. You shouldn't take him." Where I think I took him somewhere in the middle, like 7th or somewhere around there. Derrick Henry from the Baltimore Ravens had another great season. They're committed to the run. Obviously, I think they were number 1 or 2 in the NFL in terms of rushing yards. Is Derrick Henry got another season left in him? They obviously extended him. The offensive line's still work in progress with Ronnie Stanley and some of the other guys, but what are we thinking about Derrick Henry?
I think it depends on where you draft in your league. I wouldn't take if I was top five. Am I taking Derrick Henry? No way. But say you're in a 12-man league or say a 10-man league, and you've got the ninth pick, right? And I wouldn't take him with my first pick. But when it comes back around, when I think about taking him, yeah, right then I would. Like if you have that late draft, like 7 to 10, and you're going back to you for your second pick, that's when I would look to take Derrick Henry.
And hopefully he has good health. He's one of those guys I like, a future Hall of Famer and classy guy, plays really hard. Um, at number 5, and we'll stop here. This is where the receivers come in, according to these guys. Jamar Chase, he was just dominant at times. Joe Burrow was getting the ball to him early and often. I forget about his target total was something like 150 or something crazy like that. But is Jamar Chase going to have another great season? I know he got the big contract. Uh, is he smart play at number 5?
It's hard not to be, especially if you're in one of the PPR leagues. It's just like you got to sit there with him, Justin Jefferson. It's just guys that are going to get fed the ball. It's like they're going to get you points in their sleep, so it doesn't matter. If Jamar Chase is there, and I'll even say if I have the number 1 pick overall, it'd be hard pressed not to take him with all the opportunities he's going to get. So I think he's that guy.
Yeah, Jamar Chase is going to be interesting. And before we leave fantasy, I got to ask about one rookie, one of my loyal emailers, and we actually had him on the show, Jeff Little. He's a Raiders guy. All excited about Ashton Genty. I mean, Ashton Genty, is he the rookie to get, and is he going to, not only rookies, but is he going to supersede some of these veterans?
It's sick and stupid how high that guy's going in some mock drafts. I see him anywhere from 7th overall to 17th, like in the whole NFL in the draft. And my question is, he still plays for the Raiders, right? Yeah, they still have the same offensive line, right? They still have the quarterback issues where they know you're going to be running the ball, right? So, I mean, you know, good luck to everyone who takes him that early. I'm not going to be that guy.
All right, we're going to switch gears off of fantasy. We'll have a lot more talk here at Lloyd Vance, Insider Football on 1029 The Game Coast Sports Network in the upcoming weeks. Kevin and myself will get our intern need on here. We'll talk a lot more fantasy football. We're going to switch over for our divisional preview as we round the show out. This week is the NFC North. 3 teams from his team made the playoffs. So, a lot of expectations, and then it was kind of fizzle in the playoffs. So we'll start with the Detroit Lions, 15-2 last year. I mean, 6-0 in the division. Over under is 10.5 points. What are we thinking about the Lions this year? They're losing their 2 coordinators. They're going to be the same team.
I think if it was a stock watch, the stock for the Lions would be going down. You sit there, Ben Johnson in particular, like the offense, Detroit was just going up and down the field, scoring points left and right, all these yards. And you lost the guy who created all that. And on top of that, you lost your starting center as well. So you have issues with that. You have Goff another year older. I mean, to be honest, we all thought Goff was done when he went to Detroit.
Right.
So the fact the seasons that he's had, do you think he has another one of those in him? And you saw how he looked in the playoffs, and that was a home game. So I think Detroit's definitely on the downward spiral as opposed to last year. I mean, 15-2 is a hell of a season. They're not going to do that again. But they playoff bound. Yeah, they're around. You said, what was it, 11.5?
Yeah, 10 and a half.
10 and a
10
half?
and a half.
They can hit 11. They can hit 11. I don't think they can go much higher than that, but I think they can hit 11.
Yeah, I think they can hit 11. It's going to be tough, and it's going to depend on Golf, who against Washington in that 45-31 home loss, he was awful at certain points in that game, throwing interceptions, and he has some playmakers on that offense. St. Brown, he's got Williams, he's got Laporta, and then we talked about the running backs Gibbs and Montgomery. So there's a lot of pieces there, and they have probably second best offensive line behind the Eagles in football. So a lot to work with here, but yeah, you got to wonder, is that Dan Campbell magic eventually going to wear off? The last couple of years, they've been just dominant. They scored 564 points last year, 33 per game, which was number one in the NFL. But I just don't know if you're going to keep that up. So um, I say they get to 10, maybe 11 wins, but definitely not going to be the dominant team that they were in the past. So that's the Detroit Lions that we're looking at, and they play 11 playoff teams, so 11 of their games against former playoff teams. And when you're with a great team, you get that tough schedule. They're at the Ravens in week 3, they're at Kansas City in week 6. They got the big rematch against, they're at Washington, though it's week 10, and they're at the Eagles week 11. So a lot of tough games for them. And when's that cliff? When's Golf going to fall further off that cliff? That's what you
Mhm.
really got to watch. So that's with the Lions. The Minnesota Vikings, another team. Do you buy or sell them? Last year, 14-3, just dominant. The season for the ages for Sam Darnold. Darnold leaves, he goes to Seattle. You had a couple other guys like uh, offensive tackle David Queensberry. He left. Shaq Griffin, a cornerback. He's not there anymore. Daniel Jones had a couple coffee. He's not there anymore. But um, you know, can Brian Flores and his defense do it again? And then also the offensive Kevin O'Connell. So what are we thinking with the Minnesota Vikings?
I think Minnesota is really trying to do some things on the fly that are very hard to do. They're trying to continually being a playoff caliber type team with changing some key positions also. They also in the offseason though they added help for the offensive line. They added help for the defensive line. So they're trying to give McCarthy some protection back there. But let's remember, this is still a guy who's never taken a snap in an NFL game. So you don't even know what he's going to bring to the table when he gets out there. So there's definitely a lot of question marks with Minnesota.
Yeah, that's definitely with Jay McCarthy. That was such a bad injury. You wonder, like, okay, he tore like two pieces of that knee, and is he going to be ready to go to be their QB1? Obviously, you got Justin Jefferson there, and they have a lot of second receivers. You like Jordan Addison. You talk about fantasy football. He's a guy, if he can stay healthy, he puts up big numbers. Jalen Naylor, he's another good receiver. They even brought in Rondell Moore, a guy who's been a gadget guy in the past and made some plays for Arizona and some other teams. T.J. Hawkinson, he needs some help at tight end position. Running back Aaron Jones, is he going to have the same? Another guy, last year he had kind of a rebirth. And Green Bay was like, we're done with him. Is he going to do anything with Vikings?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask on that because I thought he was washed when he went to Minnesota. Talking about fantasy, that's a guy I passed on all 13 of my teams. So I was impressed how he played last year. We'll see what he does this year. But it's a lot, I think, to ask for him to be that guy again.
Yeah, and they're another team. They played 9 playoff teams, and then they played. The interesting one is they played Pittsburgh in Dublin, Ireland, week 4, and then they stay on the other side of the pond. They play Cleveland in London week 5. So you throw that in the mix. Schedule makers didn't help the Vikings any, so it's going to be tough for them. All right, quickly we keep moving here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football. The Green Bay Packers, They started out hot, then they, 2-3 down the stretch, and then they lose a stinker in Philadelphia. So are they going to be able to turn this thing around? I think a key thing, obviously, is Jordan Love.
Yeah, Jordan Love, well, as everyone knows, he got the bag already. He got his cash. He's set right there. This is his third year as a starter. This is kind of a make or break thing. It's like, he came out of nowhere basically that first year. He had the playoff success. Then last year, there's a lot of expectations on him. This year, it's like you're in your third year now. This is where you take that maturation step and guide this team deeper into the playoffs. And we're going to see if you can do it or not.
Yeah, and they're bringing back LaFleur, and it's pretty much the same band back together. But we'll see how the Packers do. I think they'll be in the mix. Uh, Chicago Bears, quickly on them. They got rid of Eberflus. Was he the problem? Is Caleb Williams going to be able to step up for this team? Last year, 5-12. Ben Johnson's coming there, that big brain genius from the Lions. Is this going to be big turnaround for the Bears?
I never thought I'd say this, but yeah, I think
Wow.
this is the year. I think with Johnson there, they are like Minnesota also added help offensive and defensively to help that football team out. I think this way Caleb Williams gets more protection. I think the best thing they got for him was Loveland, the tight end. I think Johnson's going to do for him what he did with Laporta when Laporta went to Detroit. He's going to sit there and open up. I know Cole Kmet's there as well, but I think and the addition of Loveland with the other weapons that they have there, because they do have some offensive capabilities there, in the skill set. So yeah, I think Chicago can take a nice little jump here.
Chicago's going to be interesting because they redid the offensive line, bringing in Joe Tooney from Kansas City, Jonah Jackson coming over from the Rams, trying to get that done. Obviously, Caleb Williams sacked 68 times. I do like that double tight end set that they're trying to build there, but Williams, he's got to step it up, not hold the football so long. So the Bears are going to be fun to watch, and they play some tough games as well. So but we'll talk about them more as we get to training camp. Another great week here on Insider Football with Lloyd Vance on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. Kevin, great job. Thanks for joining me. Angel, great job behind the glass. We appreciate all our listeners and watchers, and we will talk to you next week.